All right, you guys. All right, you guys. We finna do something I couldn't find a video, so now we're gonna do a reaction to a reaction of Thomas Sowell, the truth about Black Americans being stolen from Africa. This is the one I've been kind of real curious about because I've been studying a lot about that, and a lot of what I believe is based off that. So I'm not. I'm a huge history buff, but I'm also a huge puzzle buff too. So it's like, so what's happening here? You know what I'm saying? Are you debunking it or are you telling a piece of it? So let's see.
What's up, YouTube? It's your boy Johnny, back in here with another video. And today we back gonna bring some Thomas Sowell gems to the channel. And I love Thomas Sowell, man. His wisdom is something that I hope to spread far and wide. And I hope everybody that picks up the wisdom from me and from Thomas, they take it and they run around and just spread it like wildfire. This your first time to the channel. Welcome. Get yourself on it.
Now, and then what I'm gonna be doing, I'm gonna be reacting to to both thoughts, to Calloway and I'm gonna be reacting to both, but mostly to Thomas. What he say?
The goal is to reach 100 million people, or a million people, or 100 million people, and start 100 million thought-provoking conversations. Because we're not as divided as TV wants you to think. We just spirits encased in human flesh, trying to figure out this thing called life. And today we're gonna talk about Africa a little bit. We're gonna let Thomas Sowell talk about it. I'm gonna just drop my gems
Thank
here
you.
and there. So let's go.
The form in which the story of slavery has reached most people today has been along the lines of the best-selling book and widely watched television miniseries Roots by Alex Haley. Challenged on the historical accuracy of Roots, Haley said, "I tried to give my people a myth to live by, contrary to the myths to live by, created by Alex Haley and others."
Let's just pause it right there. I tried to give my people a myth to live by. So everything that we've been knowing, my mama used to watch Roots. My grandma used to watch it. This is what's been passed down to us generation after generation, brainwashing. Now we got social media really ramping it up. I just seen they did the 10-year anniversary of Trayvon Martin, and I promise you, they about to turn Trayvon Martin into the next Emmett Till. Mark my words.
Now here's the thing. There's a such thing as deception, right? So let's look at this evenly. Let's look at this. Let's rightly divide this. So he wrote Roots he wanted to give his people a myth to live by, right? So yeah, I'm part of that myth. But that does not discredit the historical account, the eyewitness account, and the experience that Black folks have had. Now, Roots may be just a story, and I used to always question it when I was a kid, but that doesn't do nothing for the historical account and everything I just named. That doesn't do nothing for all that evidence. It's something about all that evidence can't be planted, or it can't be planted, but it can be mistranslated. If he was giving us a myth for people to live by, then some of that had to be truth and some of that wasn't. So which parts was it? That's my question.
Africans were by no means the innocents portrayed in Roots, baffled as to why white men were coming in and taking their people away in chains. On the contrary, the region of West Africa from which Kunta Kinte supposedly came was one of the great slave trading regions of the continent.
Right.
Before, during, and after the white man arrived.
Right.
It was Africans who enslaved their fellow Africans, selling some of these slaves to Europeans or to Arabs, and keeping others for themselves.
Right.
Even at the peak of the Atlantic slave trade, Africans retained more slaves for themselves than they sent to the Western Hemisphere.
Oh, really?
This pattern was not confined to West Africa, from which most slaves were sent to the Western Hemisphere. In East Africa, the Maasai were feared slave raiders, and other African tribes, either alone or in conjunction with Arabs, enslaved their more vulnerable neighbors. As late as 1891, it was reported that Manyuema slavers had demoralized surrounding tribes, destroying crops, and famine reigned everywhere. Even in the early 20th century, Abyssinians were still raiding other Africans and carrying off slaves. It was 1922 before the British had gained sufficient control in Tanganyika to stamp out slavery there. Arab.
1922, we already had black people in Congress. We was thugging it out in the South, even though the Democrats was trying to hold us down. I don't like saying that. Hold my people down, and we still was thugging it out, man. We've always been warriors.
So here's what I want to say. All of that, let's say all of that is true, right? So let's begin to unpack that, right? 1922, right? Okay. 1922 ain't got nothing to do with America, right? Cool. We already had people being successful here. Cool. I'm gonna accept that. I'm gonna accept that information. So okay. So here's the disparity that people really don't understand. All Africans are not the same. They're not the same people. They don't share the same blood. So this group of black folks were in a certain area of Africa. We had slave raiders. And plus, we're not even talking about why they were doing that. You know what I'm saying? If they own slaves, cool. Because we already know that captivity, as I like to call it, captivity is an old institution of the earth. Like that, it's been perpetuated throughout a lot of history. So to say that Africans did it and then try to correlate them to being the same people group, they only look the same. But as far as like their culture, it was entirely different. What a lot of people really don't understand, that there's always been animosity between African Americans and Africans. There's always been some kind of split. Lately, I've been learning that itself is being media driven also. But at the same time, in that space, you know what I'm saying? Let me stop myself right there. Let me stop myself. Because my biggest point, I'm going to make that at the end of the video. But we got to begin to ask questions.
It's never been black versus white, and we cannot allow the media to manipulate us into a class war. We cannot be manipulated. Racism is just disguised so they don't get you to look up at the elites who are trying to control everything. Look at all the small businesses who shut down during COVID, and look who got richer. The big companies. It's not your neighbor you need to be fighting. It's the corporations and the government.
Were the leading slave raiders in East Africa.
I agree with Johnny on that instance, but I do some of it I disagree. Some of it, a lot of it, I do agree with.
Over an area larger than all of Europe. The total number of slaves exported from East Africa during the 19th century has been estimated to be at least 2 million, despite the impression created by Roots. During the era of the massive slave trade from West Africa, a white man was more likely to catch malaria in Africa than to catch slaves himself. The average life expectancy of a white man in the interior of sub-Saharan Africa at that time was less than 1 year, by and large.
That's true because of the heat and the sun. The sun would relatively kill them. Like, it's crazy.
Men from Europe or the Western.
And don't we hear all these stories? These white men came to Africa and stole us. They kidnapped our people. It's all lies. It's all lies. It's all manipulation. It's all brain control. Stop being brainwashed. Wake up. Wake up, America. Wake up. Not even just America, but if you believe that your ancestors were just stolen from Africa, you got to do some research. You just got to individually research on your own and let me know what you come to. Because we got facts here, and I hope this gets out. I hope people can wake up from the message and stop saying that we were stolen from Africa. It's not true. It's not true. It was called the slave trade, not the slave steal.
Hemisphere came.
I don't like that point, but what I'm gonna say is, what I'm gonna say in contrast to that, okay, so it was the slave trade, right? So let's ask the question: does that dismiss the treatment and how they were treated? The historical accounts about how slaves were treated by those they were traded to. Does that dismiss that? Debunking it is one thing, like it doesn't exist. But trying to dismiss it as it's not black versus white at some point in history, no. I don't believe that at all. I don't believe, you know what I'm saying? That doesn't dismiss them from how they treated folks. And I think that's what we missing. Because how can we sit up here and say that trauma, mental trauma and mental things travel passed down from generation to generation, but then we're not going to say mindsets and the way children were taught in those days didn't pass down either. Somebody had to teach somebody. So I want y'all to think about that. Like, for sure. Let's say that they weren't stolen, they were traded, but still, does that dismiss to how they was treated?
Came to the coasts of Africa, bought their slaves, and left as soon as possible. Even so, the death rates among the white crews of the ships carrying slaves to the Western Hemisphere were as high as the death rates among the slaves themselves. It was only much later, after quinine and other medical measures enabled Europeans to survive where there were tropical diseases, was it possible for them to invade Africa in force and establish empires there. But by then, the Atlantic slave trade had already been ended. During the era of that trade, Africa was largely ruled by Africans, who established the conditions under which slave sales took place.
Right.
The crew of a slave ship was in no position to defy African rulers and their armies by going out across the land and capturing people willy-nilly. The stronger African peoples captured and enslaved the weaker peoples. The same pattern found over the centuries in Europe, Asia, the Western Hemisphere, and Polynesia.
Mm-hmm.
In Nyasaland, the Ngoni and Yao swaggered over and terrorized other tribes. In Uganda, the Baganda made life miserable for their neighbors. And the Nyoro and Hima of Anko enslaved Toro women and children.
How do we know that? How do we know that they terrorize? How do we know that? With no details. How did they terrorize? What you can say terrorize, but maybe they was defending. Maybe they had intertribal wars. Like, this what we do on social media? We just slap pictures and say terrorize, terrorists. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't know what was going on.
The Tutsi dominated the Hutu in Rwanda. The Maasai lorded it over the Kikuyu and Kamba. And the latter, in turn, held the Indorobo in a kind of serfdom. It was precisely the fact that Europeans, except for the Portuguese, seldom participated in the raids that captured and enslaved Africans that enabled most people in Europe and the Americas to remain oblivious to the traumatic experience that this was, with some Africans committing suicide to avoid capture and wives being whipped as they tried to cling to their husbands or children. Historian David Breon Davis pointed out that Europeans had little
What'd you say? Wagwan. Oh, okay. Of course. So I'm gonna look at it like this: if white slave owners couldn't, if white men couldn't be in Africa just taking folks, then what imposed those African tribes to enslave a certain people on the Ivory Coast, or put them up for slavery, or sell them, basically? They had to have incentive to do that, I believe. There had to be other forces. It wasn't just, oh, we don't like these people. Like, no, there was incentive. I feel like there was incentive. There's a lot of details missing. Bro. And I'm not going to let you just say that and get away with it. And I'm not trying to perpetuate and keep like this hatred going, you know. I'm not trying to, but I'm trying to bring light that, you know, I read in between the lines, bro. This is why I'm great at breakdowns. I ask the right questions, like, you know, based on what I've seen, based on the colonization I've seen, based on what I've researched, it's a lot of stuff that can counterpoke this. You know, it's a lot of dialogue out there, and I think what we don't want to do is sit up here and believe in just one dialogue, because history is told from a lot of different perspectives. So for me, I'll believe what he says, but at the same time, this is only a piece of the puzzle. So thank you guys for checking it out, man. I'll catch you guys later. Peace.